Hey everyone, happy midweek. Today we'll be continuing through Exodus. Um, Sunday we talked about manna and the Israelites grumbling against God and the God providing for them. And today we move from food back to water. So we're in Exodus 17, and it reads, the whole Israelite community set out from the desert of Sin, traveling from place to place as the Lord commanded. They camped at Rephidim, but there was no water for the people to drink. So they quarreled with Moses and said, give us water to drink. Moses replied, why do you quarrel with me? Why do you put the Lord to the test? But the people were thirsty for water there, and they grumbled against Moses and said, why did you bring us up out of Egypt to make us and our children, lives and livestock, die of thirst? Then Moses cried out to the Lord, what am I to do with these people? They are almost ready to stone me. And the Lord answered Moses, walk on ahead of the people, and take with you some of the elders of Israel, and take in your hand the staff which you struck the Nile, and go. I will stand there before you by the rock at Horeb. Strike the rock, and water will come out of it for the people to drink. So Moses did this in the sight of the elders of Israel, and he called the place Massah and Meribah, because the Israelites quarreled and because they tested the Lord, saying, is the Lord among us or not? Again, we see the Israelites without the basic necessities of life. And again, they are crying out and grumbling to God. And again, God provides for them. Should we be tired of this story? This seems to be the same thing happening over and over again. And maybe we should be. But even with the same storyline, there's a lot we can talk about this evening. As much as I enjoy the part of the story about Moses striking the rock and water pouring out of it, I want to focus on the very end, the last verse. It says, and Moses called the place Massah, which means testing, and also Meribah, which means quarreling. And it says, because they tested, or because they quarreled, and because they tested the Lord, saying, is the Lord among us or not? Now this is a question I find myself asking often, all the time, throughout my life. And this is a question I feel like many of us are asking now, with everything going on, with tornadoes ripping through Nashville and coronavirus locking us up in our houses. This is natural, it feels like, to ask, is the Lord among us or not? And you would think with the Israelites, then after everything God has done to them up to this point, they would know that the answer is yes, God is among them. And after the miraculous signs and wonders in the land of Egypt, and after parting the Red Sea, after making undrinkable water drinkable, and providing manna and quail for them to eat, and with God guiding them with a pillar of clouds and fire, you would think that enough has happened that the Israelites would know God is among us, God is with us, God is taking care of us, but yet they continue to ask, is the Lord among us or not? It seems like the lack is failing, and looking back at the story and reading it, it is easy for us to accuse them of poor faith, of a lack of trust. But sometimes we're a little too eager, maybe, or maybe just I am, to point our fingers at the Israelites because it's easier to do that than to point that finger at ourselves. I don't know, maybe it seems as though as humans we have a difficulty trusting, a difficulty remembering. We sometimes have short and very selective memory. And when we get in a pinch, when it feels like our backs are up against a wall, we become forgetful. I think back to a story that I know I've told before here, but it fits very well within this story, within the Israelite story. So when I was in high school, and our youth group was going through all of our different youth ministers and the time of tumultuous turnover, I got pushed into leadership a little earlier than I was expecting. Freshman, sophomore year, I was working with my best friend to try to keep our youth group cohesive together. We started a Bible study, and so as a sophomore, I was teaching and leading a Bible study for my peers, for those older than me, and I felt woefully inadequate. And it's high school. High school is a rough time of trying to figure out who you are, how you fit within the world, what your life means. It's a time that your faith begins being tested. It's a time where you take the faith that was given to you from your parents, if you grew up in church, and a time where you have to begin making that decision for yourself, making that faith your own. And so during this time of trying to make my parents' faith my own, I was also teaching people about God. It was not ideal, so it seemed. And whew, I was mad at God a lot. It felt like the only time I sensed and felt God in my life was when I was preparing for lessons and giving them, when I was helping other people. And so I cried out to God like the Israelites did, "Are you with me or not? Why are you only here when I'm helping other people? Why aren't you here for my struggles, for my needs? Why aren't you here when I need you? Why are you only here when you're using me for other people?" And so I went through many rough years of wrestling with God, clinging on to teaching others because that is where I connected with God. That is where I felt God. But then being torn up in the rest of my life, angry, mad at God. And I look back at that time, and in college, it began becoming clearer what God was trying to show me. One of the things God was trying to show me through that time. He was trying to show me that God created me for the purpose of helping others. I switched my majors and became a double major in psychology and theology, and my whole life shifted, and I wound up here with you all as a youth minister and a Masters of Divinity program, two things that I never planned for. That God started shifting my life in high school, way before I even had any thoughts of this. And in college, that became a little more clear. And I felt God saying, I am always with you, even when you can't feel me, I am with you. But I wanted to teach you and show you, get through that stubborn head of yours, that you will feel fully alive, fully, more fully connected when you are living your life in purpose with how I created you, in line with desires that I gave you, and talents that I gave you. And so that rough time in high school, where I was constantly crying out to God, "Where are you?" was a time where God was showing me, "Hey, I am with you. I created you. I knit you together. I know who you are in your innermost being. I know you. And I designed you for something. And let me show you what that is." But that in between was rough. It was hard learning that lesson. And it's rough even after I learned that. You would think that after all of that, it would be a little easier for me to see God in the quiet places, to see God when I don't necessarily feel him right off the bat. Because I've been through that before. I know that God's still with me. But I still cry out to God, "Where are you? Are you with me? Where do you want me to go? What do you want me to do?" I still struggle with that in my life. Even though I went through this time, even though I have this experience, this history with God, it doesn't quiet all of the fears and doubts now. And so when I see the Israelites continuously asking God, "Where are you? Are you with us?" it connects for me. And maybe it connects for you too. This constant call of God, "Where are you?" And in this time of coronavirus, of quarantine, of fear, of anxiety, of uncertainty, it seems like we're crying out as a church, as a nation, as a world, "God, where are you? Are you with us or not?" And this is not a question that I think will disappear for us. I think this is something that we will always have, that we will always be asking. Because we are always growing in our relationship with God. We're always growing in our trust with God. Maybe that voice becomes a little smaller sometimes. Maybe it gets answered a little quicker sometimes. But it seems to be a question that we keep coming back to. And so we must learn to look for God. Now, here in this story, God answers them pretty directly. I mean, he speaks to Moses and calls him out a little ahead of the Israelites and tells him to strike this rock and water flows from it. That was a pretty direct and quick answer to the Israelites. And we don't always get that. It's not always as quick or obvious as we would like it to be. Sometimes it will happen. Sometimes we'll have moments, changes in thoughts and feelings, things that happen to us, and we can point to that and say, that was God. But sometimes God works in less obvious ways. I don't want to try to name all of them here because there are countless ones. And I don't want you to think that just because I don't say something doesn't mean that's not God. So we'll keep it brief. Just a couple examples to start thinking about it. Maybe it's God working through others. And I think back to the tornado that tore through Nashville, and the community that rose up in response to it, the compassion that flowed out of that community. It was beautiful and heartwarming to watch. After such a destructive moment, the healing that was brought forth by that community, that was God. We are all created in the image of God, created for community. And so when a community rises in response to something terrible, and when that community brings about healing, that is God. That is God working through the community, and God working with the community and with his children. Maybe God is with us as we feel a little less anxious about coronavirus and quarantine. Maybe that anxiety isn't all the way gone, but it's not as bad as it could be. Life is still moving on. It looks different, but we know that time continues to tick forward. That God created us to be resilient and adaptable and strong. And we see that in doctors who are putting their lives at risk to heal people. We see that in communities that are quarantining to keep not just themselves but those around them safe. We see the strength that God created within us, and we say, maybe we can make it through this. And so our anxiety, our fears lessen just a little bit. Maybe that is God working in our lives. See, there are a million different ways that God interacts with us each day. And we miss them a lot of the times because we're not looking for them, or we mark them off as coincidence. We fail to attribute the works of God to God, because we like to attribute to ourselves or to others or to happen chance. But our God is working every day. He's using his church to provide meals for people. In these hard times, we still see God. And so what I want us to do is to start looking for God in the ordinary, in the small things. We want God to appear in miraculous signs because it's easy for us to see. We want God to lead us with pillars of clouds and pillars of fire. But sometimes God leads by his Spirit, like he did Christ into the wilderness. Sometimes it's less obvious, sometimes it's less noticeable. But that doesn't mean it is God working less in our lives. Now, when the big moments happen, they're easy to see, and you will notice them. And so it doesn't take as much training to notice them, to recognize them. It takes a little bit of training to react to them. But it takes training to see God in the smaller moments, in the ordinary. A friend of mine has a song on Spotify called Quiet Places. Her name's Jamie Pratt. That's Pratt. And it is all about hearing God in those quiet places in our lives, knowing that God is with us. And so during quarantine, when you might not have as much to do, I have two assignments, two activities for you. The first one is I want you to go listen to the song Quiet Places by Jamie Pratt. You can find it on Spotify or on YouTube. I hope that it brings comfort during these times, and I hope it brings about thought of what we've been talking about. And the second one is I want you to start a list on your phone, in a journal, a diary, wherever you will be able to reach it daily. And I want you to start listing out ways that God is working in your lives. Because every day God touches our lives, every day God interacts with us. So I want you to start with writing at the end of the day, or when it happens, when you notice it. I want you to write one thing, one way that God has touched your life, one way that God is interacting with you. And my hope is that as you continue to write these things down, become a little more apparent each time one happens. And you'll begin to feel God closer and closer to you each day. So if you all will pray with me. God, this is a fearful and uncertain time in our lives, in our world. A time where we cry out to you, where are you? For all this death and sickness around us, God, where are you? Lord, help us to hear your answer. I pray that we always continue to cry out to you when our lives get uncertain, our lives get hard, when we become fearful or anxious. I pray that we always cry out to you, God, where are you? And I pray that you teach us how to see you and hear you and feel you. Lord, comfort us, love us, live with us and in us and through us. In your Son's name, whose example we try to live each day, and the power of your Spirit, which guides us and moves us and inspires us, we pray to you, Lord. Amen. I will see you all video you all again on Sunday. I hope you all are staying safe and healthy. Bye.